To talk more about it, Paul Mueller is an economist for the American Institute for Economic Research, and Peter Sepp is the president for the National Taxpayers Union. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, you know what? They used to say chip off the old block. Well, the chip is back on the block, the U.S. block, that is. Chip manufacturing is a crucial business, and chips are used in technology ranging from cell phones to cars to fighter jets and everything in between. Why? Because we're a huge technological country and global environment. So that's a great investment. And so many others have taken place, especially Apple, making its commitment to investment into AI to the tune of $500 billion. So isn't this a good thing, Paul?
Well, you know, who doesn't love a wedding, right, of between the company and a new country, right? Very exciting. The real question, though, is how's the marriage going to work out, and what are the motives for getting into it? So on the one hand, I think that there's a lot to look forward to here in terms of this investment with these chips and so forth. But the broader question we should be asking is what's driving this? Why is TSMC doing this? How much money are we giving them to do this, right? Are we paying them through the CHIPS Act and other sorts of things to come and do this? So again, I think there's a lot of excitement here, but we're going to have to kind of see what actually gets delivered at the end of the day.
Well, Pete, Honda also has announced that they will produce its next generation Honda Civic Hybrid in the Hoosier state of Indiana. And this move comes to avoid impending tariffs as Honda has moved their operations away from Mexico. Of course, yes, we have the tariffs that went into effect today, but this also seems to be a step in the right direction, don't you think?
Well, to take the analogy further, we need to keep chipping away at the regulatory and tax barriers that are keeping businesses from locating here. I mean, foreign investment in the United States is a sign that things are working here. It's not something to be feared, and yet tariff policies sometimes work counter to that. I think the president is on his most solid ground when he's saying we're going to extend the tax relief provisions of 2017, prevent a huge multi-trillion-dollar tax hike. We're going to make sure that the international provisions in our tax law are attracting investment here, not only from U.S. companies with affiliates abroad, but foreign companies. We need to look at permitting reform. We need to look at regulatory reform rather than tariffs, because what we're seeing right now already is retaliation from Canada and Mexico on our own products, a lot of them agricultural products, which in turn might trigger the impulse to give more subsidies from taxpayers to U.S. farmers to make them whole. That is a cycle that is not fiscally healthy.
True, but we do know that farmers provide national security because food is security. But according to a new report from the Institute for Supply Management, U.S. manufacturing expanded at its fastest pace since 2022. This marks 2 consecutive months of expansion driven by stronger demand and policy shifts under President Trump's leadership. You know, the thing is, this is a huge report that is destined to actually get better as we move forward, as more policies are implemented, as well as tax cuts and so many other things. So, Paul, how do you see things going? Because a lot of people, including President Trump, is saying that there might be some short-term pain.
Well, I think, you know, Pete said it very well. He's exactly right. That is to say that the Trump administration has a bunch of policies that are very pro-growth, extending the tax cuts, deregulation, making it easier to do business, and also unleashing U.S. energy, bringing down the costs of running factories, of running machinery, bringing down the cost of gasoline. All of that is very positive. And so I think all of those things are driving the increase in manufacturing that we see reported, that's driving optimism in the market. So that's all, again, to the positive. I think those are going to be huge improvements that are going to be paying dividends over time. It's part of what makes the tariffs so puzzling, because the tariffs are really kind of counter to that. They're throwing sand in the gears. It's slowing things down. It's going to create frictions. And the biggest problem that not enough people are talking about is just the amount of uncertainty that tariffs have introduced. How much are they going to be? How long are they going to last? And then the retaliatory tariffs that were mentioned, how high will those go? and how will that disrupt American farming or other industries? So, it's sort of like three steps forward, one step back with tariffs here. And, it's interesting. If you look at the White House memo yesterday about the tariffs, the entire thing is about drug trafficking, right? So it's really about fentanyl, at least in the public justification, which is a little bit odd. It's not really an economic justification, at least, again, in the White House release. So, again, a lot of people, I think, are scratching their heads on why the Trump administration is so gung-ho with these tariffs when the rest of his policy seems to be extremely pro-growth.
Well, a panel on CNN yesterday, Pete, discussed Trump's economic moves recently. Take a listen.
There's some evidence that this tariff business is working. You've got the Honda moving a plant to Indiana. You get the big chip deal for Arizona today. There's been over $1 trillion in announced investments by the Trump administration since he took office. People apparently responding to this idea that, hey, manufacturing things in the United States might be the way to go.
Scott Jennings relayed that the implementation of tariffs has already started to benefit our economy greatly. Do you agree with this assessment?
I think the threat of tariffs has helped in some degrees and in some instances, like with Colombia, for example. Colombia backed down in the face of major U.S. economic pressure through trade policy. And speaking of puzzling, and this is important, Canada and Mexico have already been committing more resources to help fight the flow of fentanyl across their borders. And so you have to wonder, was this 25% tariff that's going into effect and has taken place against Canada and Mexico, 10% to China, more that could be on the way for specific products like softwood lumber from Canada? Why so much pressure when the original pressure seemed to be working to achieve the fentanyl policy goal? It seems kind of counterproductive at this point, and again, it is not playing to our strengths. Sure, the threat of tariffs may be luring firms here, but so are the carrots, the tax policies, the regulatory policies. We're finally getting the incentives right.
Yeah, but we know that drugs, massive drugs and drug use and so forth, those are economic issues. It's not just a border issue.
Right. On that note, Paul Mueller, Pete Sepp, great to have you this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.